2021, and I am discussing Spiritism, the book Evolution in Two Worlds, Chapter 3, The Evolution of the Spiritual Body. And the book Evolution in Two Worlds goes down into great detail, almost too much for some people, and almost too scientific and using, a lot of medical terms. So I may not get into everything, but I will discuss it. I think it's for people who really want to understand kind of the nitty-gritty details of the processes and the structure of the spirit world and the intersection of the physical and spiritual world. This is very important. So before I begin, please subscribe, hit the bell, hit the like button, and let's begin the evolution in two worlds. Evolution, Chapter 3, Evolution of the Spiritual Body. And this section is called The Very Beginning of Life. To get an accurate idea about the spiritual body, we must recall the very beginning of life on Earth, a time when the telluric convulsions were barely over, and through which the angelic ministers of the divine wisdom, under the supervision of God's Christ, set the foundations for life in the psychopian body of the planet. So he's telling us right away, Jesus was the supervisor of creating the world and starting the evolution of life on our planet. Let me hide this. There. At the evolutionary level analyzed here, elementary matter, of which the electron is one of the base units, came together at the creative breath of the eternal intelligence and gave birth to the terrestrial province in our solar system, whose phenomena of original formation and its innermost structure we are not able to address as of yet. So what he's saying is, he's saying that, kind of the electricity, what they say, has a lot to do with magnetism and everything else, and maybe it's the universal fluid created, the electron, which I'm sure it did. And then he says, came together to creative breath. So he's talking about physical, what we see as the physical laws, right? The electricity, the atom with the creative and the divine laws of the spirit world, which is focused, mind-directed change and creation. I'll carry on. The huge atomic forge was made ready to receive the seeds of life, and under the impulse of the constructor spirits that were at work on the newborn orb, we see the earth covered with tepid oceans, invaded by a gigantic viscous mass spreading over the primitive landscape. So this was also talked about in the book On the Way to the Light by Emmanuel, that the earth was kind of covered by this glutinous substance, and it's probably was created by by thought and by some other physical action that was spurred on by the will of these great spirits under the leadership of Jesus Christ. And they were talking about constructor spirits, so, which is interesting. So constructor spirits must be those who are part of the guild, let's say, of spirits that help start fashioning whole planets. And they must get together and start creating planets and creating the prerequisites to set the foundation for life. From this cosmic jelly, the intelligent principles poured forth in its first manifestations. So intelligent principle means matter guided by spirit. The celestial monads, molded and shaped over the millennia by the spirit workers that magnetize their characteristics, permuting them under the action of internal heat and exterior cold. So they're using kind of spiritual bodies, right? And they're molding and shaping them into kind of fit into their physical bodies on the earth. Express themselves in the world through the filamentary network of protoplasm, from which they would derive their organized existence on the newly formed globe. So they were globe. So they were actually they were starting to put in, just think of ourselves as this physical body in which our free-willed soul, when it is born, inhabits, right, and is part of, and our perispirit covers every cell of our physical body. Think of it on a small, single-celled amoeba, right? That you're putting this logical, I wouldn't call it soul, but some piece of logic in the spirit world, putting it into this little tiny bit of protoplasm, algae, or whatever you want to, however you want to look at it. So it starts forming. It starts affecting the physicalness in the planet. Centuries of silent activity go by. So this is, millions of years probably. Birth of the plant kingdom. The viruses appear, and with them the principal building block of life emerges, formed by nucleoproteins and globulins, providing a suitable environment for the intelligent principles or primary monads, which started out from the living substance as microscopic centers of positive energy, stimulating karyokinetic division. So they're starting to put cells together. Next, rudimentary bacteria appear, whose species have been lost in the depth of evolution, working on the minerals in the building of the soil and dividing themselves into countless types and groups, thus forming through asexual reproduction primeval cells, which would be responsible for the emergence of the plant kingdom at its start. Millennia upon millennia come and go. So this is, it's a lot of time. Next is the formation of algae. Nourished by the resources of life that compose the protoplasmic liquid in the bacteria and cell, that the intelligent principle now feeds itself on chlorophyll, which contains one atom of magnesium in each molecule, foretelling the formation of blood from which it will nourish itself in the animal kingdom. Time acts unhurriedly at a slow pace in the birthplace of humanity. So from this, we can see is that evolution is real. There is evolution. He says, the formation of blood from which it will nourish itself in the animal kingdom. So they create this very primitive foundation, and then they just let millennia go by, let some of the natural course of events, given the programming they put around the earth and the physical universe, how things work. And they let some of that go by, then they also kind of help shape it as it goes by. So it's evolution by Darwin is real, but it's modified and directed by the spirit world. Time acts unhurriedly at a slow pace in the birthplace of humanity. The nearly invisible swimming algae with their flexuous tails appear next, dressed in cellulosic membranes circulating in bodies of water, and nourish themselves on mineral residues. They are endowed with extreme motility and sensitivity as unicellular forms, in which the already evolved monad rises to the next stage. Nevertheless, they are still plants and exist on the earth even today as primary evolutionary filters for the constantly expanding intelligent principles. Now, when they say intelligent principles, that's spirit matter, that's in matter here on earth, but it's all guided by divine will and spirit intelligence. So what spirits tell us is that everything is really is formed and kept in place. The mountains, everything, by the will of spirits, and that's kind of, they say, intelligent principle. So it's everything's in here, but it's in place because of the will of some group of high spirits or high spirit. But are super evolved plants in the realms of sensation and embryonic instinct, retaining the magnesium of chlorophyll as a testament of the species. Succeeding them in orderly fashion, the green pluricellular algae appear with a new nucleus, thus inaugurating sexual reproduction and resulting in strong classes in which death appears in the sphere of struggle, causing continual metamorphosis, which will persist in profound dynamicism over the course of eons, maintaining the construction of the forms to come. So they're creating this basis: cells, nucleus, reproduction of cells. Now, next is titled From Arthropods to Dilmarithia and Amphitrithia. Sometime later, we follow the ingress of the above referenced monad into the realms of the arthropods, with their chitinous exoskeletons whose differentiated blood contains one atom of copper in its molecular structure. After that, we find it elevated as a chrysalis of consciousness in the kingdom of higher animals, whose blood, the condensation of forces that nourish the vehicle of intelligence in the realm of the soul, possesses hemoglobin as its basic pigment, demonstrating the inalienable kinship of the individualization of the spirit in the mutations of form that attend to the incessant progress of divine creation. So they're showing that they take everything and they use it. And this kind of goes with the whole spiral progress, right? Things don't go in a straight line. It's a spiral progress. So everything they reuse and they're building up and up, which is, our science says the same thing. The difference here is what he's describing is that a lot of that was guided, what they call by the intelligence principle, guided by spirit, the wills of spirit. I'll carry on. From atomic crystallizations of minerals, from viruses and protoplasm, from bacteria and amoebas, from algae and the plants of the Precambrian era, to tribulites and cystidia to cephalopods, foraminifera and radiolaria of Silurian terrains, the spiritual principle ascends to the sponges and coelentrates of the Paleozoic era, expressing a sketch of the skeletal structure. So it must be the exoskeleton. It's kind of and this, again, our science knows this. It started with exoskeletons, right? And then they kind of evolved into be internal skeletons, like what we are. Exoskeletons like crabs and lobsters. Advancing through crustaceans, crabs and lobsters, through which for Manilia, it rehearses the vascular nervous system. The spiritual principle progresses toward the ganoids and telestii to cultivate in the great lizards and strange birds, descendants of the Pretorius in the Upper Jurassic, and arriving at the late Cretaceous era to enter the era of early mammals descended from theropid reptiles. Continuing its progress, the spirit principle requires the rudiments of higher psychological reaction amongst the Amphitheria, incorporating the acquisitions of instinct and intelligence. So again, they're taking this body, they took, amoebas to algae to plants to simple animals, lizards, strange birds, and then they keep playing with select species with modifying the DNA to give it that one more evolutionary step. And of course, this takes millions and millions of years. This is the beginning of reasoning. Accumulating experiences in the marsupials and crustaceans of the middle Eocene. So marsupials are like kangaroos. They don't give birth, right? They're like a kangaroo. Baby's born like an egg in a pouch, and then to kind of crawl up into the pouch, I should say. In the rhinoceroses, cervidae, antelope, and lower anthropods of the Miocene era, the later manifesting in the higher mammals of the Pliocene. The spiritual principle incorporates important acquisitions in the Megatheria and mammoths, the precursors of today's fauna. Reaching the Quaternary periods, Pithecanthropoids, which came before the embryonic Paleolithic civilizations, the monad poured from the spirit plane onto the physical plane, passes through the coarsest sieves of adaptation and selection, assimilating the multiple principles of organization, reproduction, memory, instinct, sensitivity, perception, and self-preservation, thus finally entering, by means of a more complete and laboriously acquired intelligence, the beginning phases of reasoning. So what they're saying is they're finally, most of these animals, very simple, they live by instinct. And this is the way spirits have told us, right? There's no like, oh, once you become a human, you can reason. And anybody with pets, and a lot of people know that there is some reasoning, like with dogs and cats, and of course elephants, dolphins. There's some free will there, You know, they don't act only by instinct. So it just shows you that everything's gradual. Now, the cutoff point really is, if you want to kind of get a point, is our free will, human free will, is always respected, right? We are allowed to be as stupid or as good as we want to be. We are allowed to make extremely bad decisions. That's why we have chaos and inequality and all sorts of things on this earth. Whereas an animal, let's take an example. There is a human and there is a charging elephant. Now that human isn't destined to die. Now the spirit could say to the human, like, I think you should move away. But for some reason, the guy says, no, I'm not moving. I'm staying right here. The spirit could stop the charging elephant because it isn't given the level of free will yet. It's good. Okay, you could just stop this charging elephant, and that wouldn't violate anything as far as the spirit world. Now, that spirit could not physically move the human or say, you must move now, right? They could try to say that, but the human could still say no. You know, whereas the spirit, if they wanted to, they could make that human move, but they don't do that. So that's kind of the difference. So that you know, it's not like, you know, animals and then bang, there's a human. Now there's reasoning there, there's intelligence, there's, you know, and they love, right? We all know that. But they really start into that primitive planet once they get higher and they get into you know, like a human soul. Now, the missing links of evolution. Understanding, however, that the divine principle emanated from the spirit realm to the earth, carrying in its mechanism of the archetype for which it was destined, like the acorn that contains the venerable oak it will become, we cannot limit its experiences to the physical plane through the birth and death of the form. It undergoes continuous modifications on the two planes in which it manifests itself. That is why many of the links of evolution have escaped the research of naturalists. They represent stages of the fragmentary consciousness outside the corporeal field per se, in the extra-physical regions, where this same incomplete consciousness continues to develop its subtle vehicle, classified at that point as a human protoform, corresponding to its degree of evolution. So let's talk about that. So what he's telling us is that we are so focused on the evolution of animals and how we became this human form. But what they're telling us is that this evolution exists. The title of the book is Evolution in Two Worlds. The evolution is also, there's a spirit and there's the physical body. Well, the spirit will go through evolution too. The spirit there'll be a intelligent principle. It'll be like a little tiny logical loop, like the calculator app on your cell phone. Very primitive. Doesn't really connect to anything, right? Doesn't communicate on the internet. It just adds and subtracts. It's a very simple calculator. But that's how a spirit form, a little module spirit intelligence, will control, let's say, a plant. And in fact, there's a good explanation of this. And let me find it, which is very interesting. They talk about this. In the 10th level of heaven, there is a college campus. And in this campus is like, there's 4 towers and there's a great tower. It's a huge college campus. And so, and each tower has its own particular area of study. And this is what they call it. They call the first is the Tower of Sleeping Life, which concerns itself with mineral life. So now they say mineral life. Now, nowhere are you ever going to see anything that says mineral is alive, right? But then they call it the Tower of Sleeping Life, mineral life. Minerals can't be alive. Well, as I said before, remember, everything is logically put in place by the force of will. It's programmed, and therefore there must be these little tiny logical programs which maintain mineral life, maintain granite, iron, copper, and then as you carry on, the whole geology of the planet. So think of that. When I call mineral life, it's like this tiny little add and subtracting calculator on your phone. And they said the second is the tower of dreaming life, which deals with plant life. Now they call it dreaming life. So what do they mean by dreaming life? So when you dream, you're like, you're confused, you kind of think you're there, but you don't know you're there, right? It's not like, they didn't call it real life, they didn't call it active life, they call it dreaming life, which is, it's in a state where you're really not in control of everything yet. You're just kind of going along with the flow. And they say that deals with plant life. So, and we all know, now, even in our physical science, you say plants are alive, right? We don't call them intelligent. But even so, there's, even in the spirit world, there is a more complex module. It might be a more complex calculator. You know, it's got logarithmic functions, cosine, sine, all that stuff, right? Is controlling each plant. Now, what I believe is, so this logical module is then, you started with mineral life, very simple. You didn't have to do much, just keep it in place. Then it had to do with plant life. Well, okay, it's got to attach it. Now, remember, our paraspirit on Earth attaches itself to every one of our cells, and those cells work together, right? The whole chakras, in Spiritism, we call them force centers. So that little module's got to say, okay, I got to control this plant, and oh, sunlight, I get chlorophyll, I want to keep growing, right? And it's kind of, it's kind of programmed that way. And in the third tower, this is all in the universal tower, right? This, I mean, all in this 10th level university city. The third is the tower of waking life, which covers animal life, not human, animal life, waking life. So you're just now start to have some sort of self-awareness. You've got an instinct where you can actually, you know, make decisions. And the decisions may be somewhat programmed, right? Your animal is gonna, if you're hungry, you're gonna kill, or, you know, eat a plant or something, right? You're just going to react to what you need to react to. And that's waking up. You're starting to really exercise, you know, depending on the animal, a little bit of reasoning, a little bit of free will, very tiny, right? You know, maybe a lizard, you know, makes a decision between two flies it wants to eat, something simple like that. So they call that the tower of waking life, which is animal life. Now, the fourth is the tower of consciousness, which is the study of free-willed human life. So this is why just these names reveal so much. So consciousness, we are conscious, we are self-conscious, we recognize ourselves, we know who we are, we analyze ourselves, we analyze what we did wrong, we did right, we analyze, okay, I'm hungry, do I want to go to the store? Or do I want to go out and hunt? Or do I want to steal food from somebody else? We're not, you know, we have some instinct, right? We're always, you know, this is what the spirit world gives us when we are born on earth, every one of us. We get our instinct built up through eons, even since mineral life probably, and our conscience, which is that set of divine laws. So now we have consciousness. So consciousness means we can actually query that set of divine laws, and now they have, oh yeah, we have a conscience too, right? Meaning that we should know from right from wrong. Doesn't mean you know, when you're a primitive human, it certainly doesn't mean you're going to listen to it. And that's probably, I think that takes eons for us as very simple humans, primitive human souls, to stop for a second and think about, oh, this may not be a good idea. Some people are quicker than others. So that is free will human life. And then they say the great tower is the tower of angelic life, which watches over all other forms of life and manages their evolution and progress toward perfection. Let me say that again. The great tower is the tower of angelic life, which watches over all forms of life and manages their evolution and progress toward perfection. So they're telling us this is right in the books by the Reverend G. Valor, which I covered in my second book, Spirits and the Spirit Universe, of how we are, what are the attributes, how we learn as a spirit, what it, how we grow, how we ascend in the spiritual hierarchy. It's all in this book. So if you're interested in what you really are in the spirit world, I recommend book 2. Now, book 1 is Heaven and Below. It's talking about the different areas of the spirit universe, so you can know what areas you are. There's heaven, there's the lower zone, there's the dark abyss, which is like purgatory, and there's the physical plane too, of course, where we are at this moment. So, but it really is, this is revealed in this. I bring in all this, information and interesting communications from spirits to really tell you what you are. So that's why I think it's very interesting to see what they said and how, and of course, now this was written, this information on the University of Five Towers was given to the Reverend G. Valor in the early 1900s. Now, what I'm reading now was given to Chico Xavier, and I forgot what year, I think 1960s or so. I can't remember exactly when this book was written. So these things, as you go through, you look at one spiritual communication, another spiritual communication. Of course, then you kind of bounce that off of what you know about the Spirits book, which was the Spirits book was codified by Allan Kardec in the 1850s, right? From communication, a series of 1,019 questions to many mediums throughout, mostly around the city of Paris, but throughout Europe. And he did not use the answers unless they were similar or the same. And of course, all these spirits are organized by the Spirit of Truth, as referenced in the New Testament, where Jesus said, I will send you the Consoler, the Spirit of Truth, to give you more information. And that's exactly what he did. And of course, he's the leader of our planet. He has all this planned out. So let me carry on. Next is evolution in time. So thus, from unicellular organisms to complex organisms, where the mind presides over the cells, employing them in its service, the being travels toward the elevated destination, traced outward on the higher plane. So again, think about the University of Five Towers, the angelic one. They're guiding all this, right? And they're guiding these little logical structures, which we start out as a simple thing like, oh, okay, I'm going to start out maintaining granite. Then I'm going to be a weed. Then I'm going to be like, who knows, an amoeba or a lizard. And then, but you're slowly gathering the complexities of controlling multi-cells, controlling the paraspirit for something very simple, to, I've forgotten how many millions or billions of cells and stuff that are in the human body. And you have to learn to control that. So, if you think of ourselves, now, one of the things I don't want people to think about is well, we're kind of like just a very sophisticated AI. And there's truth in that. We are like the most sophisticated artificial intelligence, because we were not born. Our souls were not born from man and woman by any sexual act whatsoever. We were manufactured, we were raised, but for eons and eons, to have each of us being unique personalities. And we have emotions and sensitivities, and we have, great love. And we have great badness in us too, right? We're capable of that. And that's why we're on Earth, right? We're on Earth to take out those primitive emotions, which, did us well as, in the animal kingdom. We needed those. We had to survive. We needed those as primitive humans. We had to invade other tribes to eat sometimes. Who knows? And so we have to go through that evolution. So think about that for a second, and how that creates a completely unique, extremely complex person. Now, if God wanted us all perfect, he would have just said, oh, I'm going to make you a set of routines. You're going to be a really nice person, and you're never going to do wrong. And we would live on an earth, which everyone would just kind of be alike. It would be dreadfully boring. it would not be original. Things would not be created. So, it just shows you how brilliant God is. He's created this process, this incredibly complex process to create us as unique individuals and personalities. And I always use that word kind of personality to say what we are. We are an encapsulated personality, and we are all unique. Now, the great thing when I say this is think about this. When you are born on earth from a physical mother and father, you are not equal to other people, right? We always talk about everyone's equal, but that's equal under the law. I could never be a basketball player or a football player, right? I could never be a jet pilot. My eyes weren't good. So I was not born equal. I'm not as intelligent as many people. I, can't sing. All that. Now, but as a spirit, you are truly equal. You have the capacity to be a genius creator like Mozart, if that's what you want to focus on, right? You have the capacity to be as smart as Einstein, if that's really what you go. You have the capacity to be like Mother Teresa and be the most giving, selfless person on earth. You have the capacity to combine all of that given enough time, which is like Jesus, right? This is why Jesus, who rose just like us, is so wonderful, because he went through all this. And who knows what he had focused on for 1,000 years or two to become really good and be the best. Whatever planet he was on, he probably was the best, right? And so you are not limited. Whatever you think you're limited in this body, and we all have big limitations, but also realize that your limitations are there. A lot of times they're artificially created to stop you from doing what you've done in other lives. I've known people who, just were extremely talented, but they were like, no, we're not going to let you become a famous singer. No, we're not going to let you become a famous actor. You did that before, and it's better you don't do this. You need to learn and grow in a different direction for this life. So the other thing to think about as being an immortal soul, which can be born life after life, you've never lost it. There's no losing any opportunity. You will always have that opportunity again in another life. Just stop thinking in terms of weeks and months, decades. Don't even think in terms of one life. Think in terms of many lives. So if you're old, like I am, you still have your dreams. All right, now I'm thinking, okay, what do I want to do in my next life? I don't want to work for anybody, I can tell you that. But hey, I'm hoping I'm getting just a little bit smart enough to know that I will really take the advice of my spiritual superiors. Because I've been told I've been stubborn in the past, and I failed time and time again. Probably because I always thought I knew best what's for me. And if you're smart, discard that. You probably don't know best when they can really look at your personality and your character and analyze your attributes and your not so good attributes in a more dispassionate way. Okay, let me carry on. So we were talking about evolution in time from unicellular organisms to complex organisms. It uses the thread of experience to weave the tunic of its own exteriorization in accordance with the mental mode it brings with itself, and according to the laws of action, reaction, and renewal, through which it automates its own acquisitions. So, think about what he said. So, it's to weave the tunic of its own exteriorization, in accordance with the mental mold it brings with itself. Now, this concerns us as humans, and it concerns even plants and animals. So, its mental mold, which is the paraspirit, let's say, let's use a complex animal, let's call it ourselves. Our paraspirit, which is connected to every cell of our body, affects what we look like, affects our health, affects our whole line of destiny. They're saying this is true even at the smallest detail. So this little logical tiny module is already learning how to affect its physical encapsulation. From the nerve impulses to the immunological defense, so everything, right? Even our nerve impulses, our blood defending against viruses and bacteria, it controls everything. We're not this unthinking automata that science thinks we are. Oh, the human body works like this, and the hormones does this. No, it's a lot of it's regulated by our perispirit, because it's practice regulating more and more complex animals through eons. From the nerve impulse to the immunological defense, building the crown center in its own brain through the automatic reflex of sensations and impressions over millions and millions of years. So what is he saying? He's saying that it gets more sophisticated, it gets better, it gets smarter, it gets, it gets to be a veteran of controlling physical bodies. You can't beat that, right? This is what we need to do. This is why reincarnation is so important. So here's the crown center. The crown center, and it's also called crown chakra in the Hindu and Buddhist religions, controls all these other centers. So if you look at this little module that controls, let's say, algae or a plant, you didn't need the spleen, you didn't need the heart, right? You probably just had something very simple. Maybe just the root chakra, the simple reproduction or survival, or maybe you had a very simple crown chakra and one other one. Then you got higher and higher different levels of plants and animals. And okay, look, we need to have the heart center, we need to have the throat, right? If you're a dog, you have to bark. And your paraspiritual body started out as immature and unthinking, right? Dreaming life, waking life. And it got to be more and more complex. And of course, then your crown center got big. Okay, I can regulate these better now, right? I know how to regulate these things and in a more efficient manner. So again, you're just this really amazingly smart piece of intelligence who has millions of years of experience, most of which you'll never remember, because why remember when you were a plant? Serves no purpose, but you probably were. So, building the crown center in its own brain through the automatic reflection of sensations and impressions over millions and millions of years. I read that again, but I thought it was important. Through the crown center, with the aid of the sublime powers that guide its progress, it configures the other energy centers in its inner world, fixating them in the composition of its soul. So again, spiritual, and this could be low-level spirits helping the planning of even lower-level spirits who control, and these are just not on our level, right? These are very simple elementals, right? They mirror more elementals, pieces of logic, but they're teaching, okay, no, you got to learn this. They're stepping them up step by step. However, to reach the age of reasoning and be called a human being endowed with rationality and discernment, the being automated in its impulses on the journey towards the angelic kingdom took no less than 1.5 billion years to arrive at the very beginnings of the Quaternary period, in which the elementary civilization of the Stone Age starts to display some primitive skills. So again, so I guess when they had some sort of animal with reasoning, it took 1.5 billion years. So we look at this again. However, to reach the age of reasoning and be called a human being, endowed with rationality and discernment, the being automated in its impulses on the journey toward the angelic kingdom took no less than 1.5 billion years to arrive at the very beginning of the Quaternary period, in which the elementary civilization of the Stone Age starts to display some primitive skills. This is perfectly verifiable in the natural breakdown of certain radioactive elements in the geological mass of the globe. Taking into consideration the fact that civilization flourished approximately 200,000 years ago, preparing human beings with Christ's blessings for the age of responsibility, we are led to recognize the early stage of the psychological knowledge destined to automatize in the human spirit's psychomatic constitution the moral acquisitions that will inhabit its earthly conscious to a higher degree of ascension to cosmic consciousness. So it took a long time for them to create what is the R encapsulation, so we can hold the reasoning, right? It took no less than 1.5 billion years to create that, where we can put in thinking humans, and the fact that civilization started coming up about 200,000 years ago. This is a long time. It's only been 2,000 years since Christ. About 6,000 years since we really kind of recorded human history. Now, the spirit world has told us that before our current level of technology, there were more advanced technology. There was Lemuria, and there was Atlantis, and also there were 2 other civilizations that we have no memory of, and no one even has any mythological memory of. So there were other civilizations. Now, why did these civilizations were destroyed? Because humans were more technologically advanced than they were spiritually and morally advanced. And so they brought them down so they can rebuild them again. That's why don't worry about anything. I always tell people are like worried about nations and politics. And I said, this is all so temporary that don't worry about it. It's not really important to us. It is, look, the human race and what we are now and different races, we're all going to meld together. We're going to be something different. It could be more of a, who knows what color. In fact, spirits talk about there's different beings that come from different planets. And they come here and they're completely different. So don't get wedded to one idea. Don't get wedded to say, hey, hey, I'm Irish and I just love the Irish and we're better than everybody else. Well, if you want to think, that's fine, but you're a spirit, you're a soul. You will maybe next time be born halfway around the world. You may be born, on a South Sea island or in India or wherever you think is best. They think is best for you, and you agree if you're at a certain level, and you help plan out your life. That's where you will be, and you'll be in a different body. Now, your paraspirit will try to mold that body so you kind of look like you think you should look like, within the bounds of the genetic code of your 2 parents. Now, also remember that the sperm from the father, the spirits, if you're at a certain level and they really want to help you, they'll pick out that sperm, the best sperm for you, and have it fertilize the egg. There's a lot of interaction between the physical and the natural world. And you may also be gifted with, if you want to be a surgeon, you may also be gifted with, steady your hands, a better eyesight, all that. But this is the main thing, is all this is temporary, and it's all just more us improving ourselves. So anyway, if you would like to learn more, I always recommend you start with my book, Heaven and Below, Book on Spiritism. And of course, I talked about the second book, which is Spirits and the Spirit Universe. And then I would explore the third book, is How We Are Guided by spirits, which tells about how each of us are guided by our guardian angels, by how we're guided in whole cultures, countries, organizations, all that. How we are. Oh, sorry, I picked the wrong one. How we guided by spirits is over here. And also talks about the future of Earth. What is Earth going to look like? They have it all planned out. Now, is it planned to the nth detail? No. It's planned out, and they're going to move us, collectively forward as races and cultures and technology, and we are beginning to be a planet of regeneration, next level. So there's going to be major upheavals right now. That's why right in the year 2000, there's politics, everything else. There's a lot going on. People know that, and people spiritually kind of feel that too. They feel the energy. So the ones who aren't on board with becoming nicer people, I have news for you. You will not be on this planet. The apocalypse that's John said in Revelation is not here on Earth, where people are going to disappear one day and the Earth is going to be full of good people, or the heavens will be full of good people, I should say. It's happening in the background, you don't see it. The spirits who are on Earth and don't get with the program, who still take advantage of people, who are cruel and mean, and don't really have any potential because of their free will to improve, they'll be sent to other planets. Another planet of atonement, maybe a primitive planet. They will, and it's not like a sentence forever. They will grow and they'll help that planet. They will be just like the Earth, right? The Earth, they had a lot of people from advanced planets who populated the Earth. They weren't doing very good on those planets, but they came here and they actually kind of pushed civilizations to a higher degree because that's what they were used to. So this is all part of a plan, so don't get too worried about things. Do the best you can, right? You have, you know, Spiritism wants us to do our civic duty. They want us to help those people, those governments and politics that promote individual freedom, the freedom of speech, the respect of other people's speech. That's who we should help, and you know, and vote for, or however, you know, we do that in whatever country you're in, or just survive if you have to. In some countries, I know it's not easy living in places like North Korea or Venezuela. But, you know, unfortunately, if you're listening to those from those countries, that's something that you were given so you can learn. You probably were one of the oppressors before, and now you're learning what it's like to be the oppressed, which is very unfortunate. But if you can spiritually grow from that, then you will be victorious in your life. Anyway, so in that, I just want to say, keep up your spirits, be happy. This is just a journey, a long journey, that this is not the start, this is not the end. Your dreams can all come true. This maybe not this life, but some future life. Anyway, I want to say God bless everyone.